In this ever-dynamic world, the Philippines remains to be one of the emerging economies in Southeast Asia. As a player in the fastest-growing economic region, as well as the largest continental economy in various measures, the economy of the Philippines is the world's 34th largest economy by nominal GDP, the 13th largest economy in Asia, and the third largest economy in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The country has seen an economic transition from being an agricultural nation to a country that is focused on services and manufacturing, which makes it a newly industrialized country. According to the Director General of International Renewable Energy Agency, the Philippines, like many countries in Southeast Asia, faces the challenge of a growing population and rising demand for energy to power its economic growth. Although these are the country's conditions, nearly half of its primary energy supplied is imported, which makes Philippines ultimately subjected to the rising cost for fuel imports and global oil price volatility. It cannot be denied that the Philippines is also frequently troubled by natural disasters that adversely impact its energy infrastructure. In fact, the Global Climate Risk Index proves the point by ranking the Philippines as the number one country in the world affected by climate-related disasters over the last 20 years. The given circumstances make it significant to be aware of the Philippines' energy situation, as it is deemed that energy as a concept has a role to play in economics. In terms of energy use, the Philippines makes use of conventional fossil fuels, such as oil and gas, as its main source to satisfy the primary energy demands. To give you a picture of the primary energy consumption in the Philippines, data from 2011 show us that 31% of the consumption was met by oil, 20% by coal, 22% by geothermal, 12% by biomass, 6% by hydro, and 1% by other renewable energy like wind, solar, and biofuel. As apparent as it may seem, the Philippines is mainly reliant on non-renewable energy resources as sources of our energy. According to a discussion by National Geographic, non-renewable energy comes from sources that will run out or will not be replenished in our lifetimes. Most non-renewable energy sources are fossil fuels, and their main element would be carbon. It is understood that fossil fuels are a valuable source of energy due to their inexpensive nature and ease of storage and shipment. However, our use of fossil fuels is detrimental for the environment. When we burn the oil and coal for the energy we need, particles are released, which then pollute the air, water, and land. The overall process then leads to an unbalanced carbon budget, which ultimately leads to rising global temperatures. As you can see, we can now form a solid connection between energy use and the problem in the Philippines. As we burn more of the fossil fuels for our needs, we foster climate change and become the most vulnerable to the harm our actions lead us to. This brings us to the grave need for an energy revolution.
Well, technically speaking, if we're going to define renewable energy, this refers to a particular resource that may have been depleted and eventually ay nagkakaroon siya ulit or nabubuo siya ulit to sustain a particular life. Honestly speaking, tingin ko ay hindi dahil unang-una, the population of the world is increasing, it is continuously increasing, and I think to rely everything on it, baka kasi sakaling maubos yung mga resources po natin. And kapag sinabi kasi natin renewable energy, hindi naman yan agad-agad na mare-renew. So it will take time. Syempre, unang-una sa lahat, we can make use of these resources more fully and mas magiging maayos yung way of living natin, for we are being dependent on resources na readily available na. And also masasabi rin natin na in terms of the production of it ay hindi siya ganun ka magiging mahirap dahil nga it is readily available.
In line with your first question, the role of energy consumption to economic development. First, we have to understand that economic development is a series of economic growth. So, when there is high energy consumption, it follows that there would be more individuals who are purchasing, let's say, or using this service. And if there will be more services, it follows more income, let's say, for the companies who are generating such. And of course, we know that energy is part of our consumer spending in our GDP. So if there would be more energy consumption, it follows that there would be higher income for every individual. Actually, higher energy consumption also translates for some researches, higher energy consumption also translate to more development. It could be technological advancement, it could be, let's say, agricultural advancement. Kasi whenever whenever consumption is high, the presumption is that there will be more windows for innovation. So that is the reason why energy consumption matters, no? In general, when we talk about the needs, when you in econ we have this thing called utility, diba? And utility is the individual's or a certain individual's pleasure, happiness, or satisfaction. And sometimes an individual utility is brought about by more energy that is being consumed. Let's say, for instance, if, let's say, in Japan, they need more energy so that they could operate better, right? I mean, so that they could operate their trains, etc. And that entails more energy to be consumed by the country. So, higher energy consumption most of the time is incorporated by more technological advancements. And apparently, if there will be more consumed energy, chances are there will be higher economic growth. And again, if economic growth is continuous or it often happens all the time, then it follows economic development. Actually, you know that we are currently gearing towards sustainable development goals, right? And part of sustainable development goals would be cleaner energy. Why is it we want cleaner energy? Because the reason why we are experiencing climate change is because of too much carbon emission. And for us to lessen the carbon emissions in the world, diba, one of the alternative would be renewable energy. The role of renewable resources as source of clean and sustainable energy in the Philippines is, at least for now, very crucial. Apparently, because there are still areas in our country which do not have an access to non-renewable energy, or they do not have Meralco, they do not have the NECO, etc. So in other areas, especially in the far-flung areas, their role is very crucial because that is their only source of energy more than anything else. So more than their role as a source of clean and sustainable energy, they are actually, for some remote areas in the Philippines, the sole source of energy, because Meralco cannot reach that far. Actually, if you will go to some far-flung areas in Cebu or Quezon province, like in Patnanungan Island, I am not sure with Jomalig. For, let's say, for Patnanungan, the only source of energy there are the renewable sources of energy. Moreover, I believe that right now, there are several institutions who are currently investing so much money so that they will experience renewable energies. I know there are several companies right now who are having several bids with private companies so that they can have renewable energy as part of their operations. The role of renewable energy is not only in a micro level meaning the individual household for far-flung areas, but it is also relevant for larger companies because it could be something that they could use to save in the future. But it's the problem probably, I think the problem why some companies could not adapt to renewable energy right now, kasi nga, just like what I have mentioned, but both in a micro and in a macro level, level, renewable energy really helps, no? Really helps in sustainable energy in the Philippines. Actually, both private and government are having initiatives towards attaining sustainable or renewable energy. So, for private companies, I think, so actually in other countries, they have this rule that almost all companies should have at least a certain portion of their consumption in renewable energy. In the Philippines, actually, there are, when it comes to government initiatives, I think you know that in our country, no, it depends on the political will of the governor or the mayor. You've been to Pililla Rizal, di ba? So Pililla Rizal has several windmills. When it comes to government initiatives in the Philippines, actually, whoever is in the authority. When you talk about corporate initiatives, there are several corporations which are really capitalizing on making buildings green. When you talk about other countries, no, I hope in the future, I think you're taking development economics, you will hear about this environmental Kuznets curve. So when you talk about environmental Kuznets curve, that means as GDP increases, chances are your contribution to CO2 emission also increases. Pero di ba curve siya? So that means there is a certain point wherein pag sobrang taas na ng GDP mo, you will no longer think about consuming kasi you already reach a certain point wherein your GDP is already good. There would be a break. Ibig sabihin, whatever that break is, the country is already getting started to do green initiatives. Pero kasi the problem in the Philippines is that, yun nga, the initiatives are usual, di ba, our growth is steady, but it is not enough to meet the needs of the people. So, since actually our CO2 emission is increasing, no, we haven't reached the point wherein our CO2 emission is declining. Kasi I think it is because we are still insofar as economy is concerned, the primary focus of the Philippines right now would be the social and economic development related initiative. We are not yet at that environmental Kuznets curve wherein we reach a certain point wherein we need environment more than all the other development related projects. When it comes to government initiative, most of the time, if the person of authority in the government has the will, then energy. Pero since we do not have a specific law yet, which is related to or imposing, let's say, certain municipalities to have renewable energy, we cannot really reach the environmental Kuznets curve, or we cannot really have that curve yet. Kasi why is it we haven't reached that environmental Kuznets curve yet? Because we do not have a specific policy. No, we do not have a specific policy encourages people or the local government authority to initiate with the renewable energy. So I think as an average reasonable economist, if for example you really want to push through sustainable development, there must be an initiative from the local government, no? Kasi for example, right now we have an initiative towards zero waste. So certain areas in the Philippines are trying their best to segregate their waste. Pero hindi pa rin siya but it's not yet fully successful. Bakit di siya fully successful? Kasi nga, ang tawag dito, maraming taong because there are a lot of people who really does not care about the environment, right? So, if there is no policy, if there is a policy already existing when it comes to waste and yet we are not successful, what more kapag halimbawa, we do not have a specific policy towards renewable energy. So, yun lang. At present, there are very limited government initiatives towards renewable energy, but there are several private initiatives. Actually, there are even companies who are doing CSR, of course, CSR, corporate social responsibility, that is gearing towards sustainable energy. So, yun lang naman. Okay na.
As we spend time researching on renewable resources as a main source of energy, we came to support the idea of shifting from a country that makes use of unrenewable energy to one that actually uses renewable resources as their primary source of energy. So this is an action plan that we have adopted and developed from the government of Victoria in Australia.
This does not necessarily mean that we are the ones to take action, but rather a set of suggestions for the government on how they ought to act on these steps.
First step to this action plan is to set goals and targets for our country. It is important that we look ahead and have a vision of what we intended to be as a country that utilizes renewable energy. The sector must be ambitious yet realistic in setting these objectives.
The second is to improve the sector of energy. We must support the sector's growth, and we believe that this can be done by creating new jobs and growing our economy through boosting the energy sector.
Third, to empower communities and consumers. It's important to empower the main stakeholders by directly engaging them. The government must be there to support community energy projects and ensure an affordable energy supply.
Is to modernize our energy system. Modernizing our energy system can be done by strengthening our affordable, reliable, and resilient energy system. Innovations in the way energy is stored and created would help make advancements in the energy sector.
Lastly is the investment of time and necessary resources. All of the mentioned steps would not be possible without the dedication this movement needs. We must be able to realize that the benefits may take long, but will eventually outweigh the costs tenfold. We will reap the benefits of tomorrow. Thank you.
We need your support. We can shift our nation from dirty fossil fuels to cleaner, renewable sources of power, but not without you.
Erupted in 2013. Popocatépetl erupts every few years. Nearby residents have learned to stay well clear of this